All right, everyone, I'm excited to introduce my next guest, actor, producer, author. Loved him in Little House on the Prairie, Forever, The New Gidget, TV's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, here to celebrate the 50th anniversary of Little House on the Prairie and his new book, Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Dean Butler, how are you, sir?
Good, Jeff. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I read your book. I loved it. This is why we're here, but we're going to talk about a lot of things. I loved how sincere you were in the book and kind of certain stories didn't really sugarcoat. It was like, this didn't go well, and you laid it out. And it's nice to, there was one thing, one issue I had with the book, one issue. You want to hear what it is?
Okay.
It doesn't mention your 3 trips to the Love Boat.
Ah, yes. Well, did I acknowledge doing the Love Boat?
I don't
even know
think you
that
did. I don't think you did. And
I
to me,
don't think
like,
I
that is like
talked
the
about it, but
pinnacle.
we're talking about it now, Jeff. So that's the important thing. Yeah, that was a time. That was one of those fun little perks of being involved in a primetime series at that time, is that you would just get, there were no auditions, you would just get a script at home with an invitation to participate, and this was the part, and you were going to go on. Now, I didn't do any actual cruises. All of my Love Boat cruises were on the stage, but it was fun. And there was the fantasy islands and the hotels, and all of that was because of Aaron Spelling was a huge part of the viewing experience. Aaron Spelling owned ABC at that point. It was just an unbelievable. Then you had Dynasty and all the other things he was doing. It just was a pretty extraordinary time for him and for that kind of anthology entertainment. It was really what a formula, and it just worked. He hit something that really worked.
And there was something very consistent about your 3 episodes, which I didn't just
Well,
IMDb. I mean, I watched
three
them. I
three
watched them,
newlywed
dude.
episodes. Yeah,
You had
yeah, yeah,
always
yeah.
just gotten married.
Yes,
So
yes. That's how they saw it. That's how, certainly at the Love Boat, that's how they saw me. I'm trying to think of Fantasy Island. There was a mismatched romance. It was always, look, all these shows, there was generally always a romance of some kind involved. Yes, my Love Boats were 3 newlywed episodes with Mary McDonough, with Mary Carteret, and with
Crystal
Crystal
Bernard,
Bernard.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just so funny. Like, every time we just got married today.
Yeah.
Isaac Gopher and Doc have been on my show, so I'm upset. That's why I love talking about it. I grew up on it. Yeah.
Ted Lange was one of our favorite directors on the new Gidget. He came in, I think he did, I don't know if he did a third of them, but he did a bunch of them, and he was great to work with. I had one of my favorite lines ever on Love Boat with Mary Carteret, and it's a classic old joke. And that the soup is cold, is served, and I say, waiter, my soup is cold. He says, she says, honey, that's gazpacho. And the response is, hey, gazpacho, my soup is cold.
Dean, I laughed so
You
hard at
know,
that line. I wrote
well,
it down.
it's one of my favorite lines. After Ted told me he had a take on how to deliver the line, and I thought it was one of my favorites as a silly, tried and true kind of piece of dialogue. It worked.
Yeah, it was funny. And 2 of the 3 you walked away still married, so that's good on you. I think 1 you decided it was just all
There
about
you
the
go.
sex. I think your character probably had more sex than anyone else on the Love Boat. That
Well,
coming
that's
in strong.
boy.
It's a possible Guinness Book record.
Well, Jeff, that's a cool record to have. I wouldn't mind having that record.
It's funny,
I'm
yeah.
sure there were others who partook plenty, but yes, I had my 3 hot and heavy newlywed episodes. So one presumes that there's some pretty good activity going on during those early hours of the new marriage.
Yes, yes, that was
Yeah,
not hidden at
yeah.
all. It was, were these timeline wise, was this while you were still on Little House?
Oh, yeah, I think that all of that sort of, they were always looking to take advantage of people who were in prime time. I think all three of the episodes, maybe the last one was post Little House, but I feel like at least two of the three were during Little House. I could be wrong on that, but I feel like
Yeah.
that's
So it was fun to great character that you're so known for and do it. Like when I talked to Karen, we were talking about her Love Boat, and the same thing where she got to change it up a little bit from Ma.
Yeah, no, Karen Grassley is as an older woman and was as a younger woman very attractive. And so for Karen to get an opportunity to be seen as a contemporary woman instead of covered in long dresses and long sleeves and all of that, Karen got to be a contemporary woman at least. And I'm sure that was fun for her to get that chance to do that. I think the costuming on Little House was, for the men, it was just a normal day. Okay, the boot was a little different. You're wearing a hat where you might not normally wear a hat, but basically men's clothing is the same. I think you'd have to go way back to find an era where the clothing wasn't pretty much what we would be used to today. For the women, it was an entirely different situation. So there was a lot of appliance going on with all of that. And with the heat in Simi Valley during the summer months, and you always were filming blizzards in July, the heat was just off the charts. And they're just like gallons of perspiration coming off these women during those times. It was pretty intense.
I think no matter what time frame in the period of living, guy clothes is always easier than women clothes, right?
Oh yeah, yeah, I would think so. I would think so. Certainly, I think you may have to go back to the 1500s, the 1600s to find maybe where men's clothing is as involved as women's clothing. But yeah, I think in relatively modern times, no question, women have all the complexity.
So you helped organize the big 50th that just happened. Like there was like this insanely large get together where all of you were there. I do have a question.
No, we weren't all there, but I will say it was the largest gathering of cast in over 30 years. And it was quite an event. And it had been in the works for the beginnings of the idea it started in 2019. That was the first idea of it. I became involved seriously in probably either it was late 2022 or early 2023, and came in at the time when the event, where it really had to start coming into existence. It had to start getting real. And so it was a constant flow of ideas, Jeff. There was we can do this, and we can do this, and we can do this. And yes, we could, but at a certain point, we have to lock down and saying, okay, we could do this and this, but we are going to do this and this. And reaching that point, and with a group of creative people where we're committing ourselves and saying, all right, we are doing this, but we're not doing this and this. That's a hard place to get to. I think my job became to try and get synergy around what we are going to do as opposed to continuing to invent what we could do. And the Simi Valley Chamber of Commerce, which is the one, this was really their event. They had the license. They had done all of the business. They were fully invested financially in doing this. So it was our job to interface as a cast and as a committee with them. And I think in the end, it just so far exceeded our expectations. It was a pretty extraordinary weekend, 18,000 people from 27 countries. It was just, there was so much Little House love in Simi Valley that weekend. It was, I think, everyone, all of our Little House family who were there, I think were pretty astonished by the way it came together. It was certainly a high watermark for, I think, for everybody. who was there. We'd never had an event like that before. That would be hard to repeat. I think we're going to have another really special event in late August, early September in Connecticut. But the thing I think that distinguishes what we did in Simi Valley is the fact that the show's home was in Simi Valley, and we staged the event in a place. The major staging was close to Big Sky Movie Ranch, but there was an element of the event that was back at Big Sky Movie Ranch, putting buildings or facades of buildings back on the property, geolocated exactly where they were, so that bus tours could drive through there and people could take their videos and their pictures. And it was just incredible to see the joy in people's eyes as they were doing that. The laughter, the tears, just the expressions of emotion and gratitude were amazing. And we knew we'd sold a lot of tickets, but until you see people start to actually show up, you really don't know what you've got until they're there. When on the Friday morning, when I came out of our town square tent after doing a presentation with a group of cast members, the line to get in was half a mile down the street. And it was like, oh my God, we hit the mother lode here. This is just unbelievable. We were thrilled.
It's incredible. Given 50 years is a long time. So that means this has been passed on in those families from generation to generation. And I'm assuming it wasn't all 95-year-olds. It wasn't,
yeah,
it wasn't all like
60,
70, 80-year-olds.
And that's the cool thing you're making reference to it, Jeff, is that the audience was from small children through their grandparents' age. The whole demographic spectrum was represented at Big Sky that weekend, which was incredibly gratifying because you see that people have shared the show with those that they love, and that love has been translated, keeps getting translated to younger generations. I think that's the universality of the show. It's not contingent on fashion. It's a world that no one who's alive today, or even was alive when it began in 1974, no one was really living in that world when we started. And I think that gave the show this sense that you were stepping into this island of time and space that was unique unto itself. And I think people really embraced the fantasy of that. There's this fervent dream for a simpler, wholesome, loving, connected family life, which a lot of people don't have for various reasons. Little House has always espoused that as a primary value, and people responded incredibly well to that then, and they continue to respond to that today.
The show itself, because when I was interviewing Allison and Karen, I started rewatching a bunch of episodes, and
Sure.
It's built to last. A lot of times you watch something old, you're like, it doesn't hold up, but the care and the story and the acting, everything like that is just as solid today as it was then. I can see where it gets passed on from generation to generation so successfully.
I think that there's an aspect to it where it's an older program beyond the setting, which is clearly of another time. But because the show was shot on film with one, maybe two cameras predominantly, there were occasions when there were more than one or two cameras on set. But for the most part, it's a 1-2 camera show. The pacing of the show is slower. And the technology, the making of the show, the post-production of the show was cut with a razor, tape the work print together, and create an answer print from all these cut things. It was not that indestructible nonlinear editing, which is obviously the dominant form of editorial now, where the pacing can be much quicker and you can make a decision and click undo and you can back away from it. When you were cutting with the razor blade, you could reverse it, but you had to go back and find that frame or 2 frames or a foot of whatever it was, and you had to physically tape it back into the scene. So that made editing a much more intentional process, that you weren't experimenting with the editorial. Michael shot it with an idea that it would be cut a certain way, and with the notes that the script supervisors were providing coming off of the set, it was very clear what needed to be done. And so they did that. In this era, you can shoot, it's not uncommon to have 3-4 cameras on a set, all doing different things with dollies and cranes and all kinds of things. And it's wonderful for editorial. You jam sync all this footage together, and an editor can just go through and click, and you can construct a scene and then save it and cut it again. And you can cut it infinite numbers of ways. You just simply couldn't do that with a razor blade efficiently and expect to keep it together. It was a very deliberate process. And I think that would be the big difference that audiences would see today as compared to what was going on then, where everything was slower.
The folks that show up to the 50th anniversary, in the book, it was interesting. You talked about there's two types of Little House fans. There's ones that are book lovers and series lovers. So I imagine to come to one of these things, since it's show focused, it's probably either series based or a hybrid of the two, the ones that add the books and the show.
Yeah, I think, they're in Little House world. There are certainly, I've never known a series fan who rejected the concept of the books. It may be that they haven't read them much. It's maybe not a big part of their reading. It's much more common that people who really grew up on the books would reject the series because it didn't stick to exactly the flow of the books, which Michael's opinion on that, his feeling was that you simply couldn't maintain the level of storytelling that you would need to support 22 episode seasons with the material that was in the books. And Michael was expert at this. He understood how to do this. So this is why in the series you're seeing plot points that are wildly different than what's in the books, and characters that are nowhere in existence in the books. But it was, what I love about both is I think the tone is the same. Whether you're watching the series or reading the books, I think they belong together. They are of a similar feeling. Obviously, the series is visual. I think the big difference stylistically in the books is that the books are about what people did. It's very much, we baked bread and we planted the crop and we built the house and we made the clothing and all that. And I think that was a big part of what Laura Ingalls Wilder was trying to do with her books, was to give people this taste of what that life really was. Michael really focused on what people felt. Little House as a television series was an emotional journey. And you had all of that beautiful music that David Rose composed that really became the underscore for this incredible emotional experience. Everyone may have lived in simple homes and simple clothing, but their lives emotionally were gone with the wind. It was big, it was dramatic, it was powerful. And I think David really made that pitch to do it that way. The initial concept had been to do the series, do the score with much the way the Waltons did it, with a harmonica and a string bass and maybe a mandolin. And it was a pretty simple orchestration. David's take was, no, we need to do this with a 50-piece orchestra, and it needs to be this rich emotional background. And I think in retrospect, when you look at these things, I think David's instinct was so right on this. And I've long believed that it's David Rose's music that is a huge part of what brings tears to people's eyes as they watch the program and are taken in by these stories. It's that subtextual message that David is giving with his music that I think primally touches people in this way that only music can do, where it's touching on something psychological in us that we intuitively understand. He takes us there. And then if you see Pa crying or Ma crying, whatever it is that they're doing, but it's the music that puts you in that space. And then the acting tells you specifically what's going on. But it's a very powerful experience to watch the really emotional episodes of Little House. It is really an emotional journey, and it's a beautiful emotional journey.
Very beautiful. I couldn't agree with you more on the music. The music can make a break. And yeah, it's the music that's subconsciously moving you in the direction.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just imagine changing cues to some other composer, a different style of music, and putting it to the exact same cuts. I would imagine that the response, you could get all kinds of different responses depending on what the music is that you put there. Because you said the music is providing the emotional foundation of what the audience is expecting to see. And we react accordingly. And it was just very powerful and incredibly effective.
Incredibly. So the book covers so much. And there was a couple of things that I wanted to ask you about before we jump. We'll go back to Little House, but just because you do a good job kind of. So you were Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof. Now, the reason I bring this up.
Waspiest Tevye ever cast.
Waspiest Tevye ever. But that's my Hebrew name. Yeah. So anytime I see someone with Tevye, I'm like, wow. Oh, okay. So.
Such a great show. You obviously know the show. This is one of the great books, an incredible score and beautiful songs. It is one of those defining shows in Broadway musical theater history. It's a very special show, which is, of course, why I don't know how much it's being done today, because it's such a large show to do. And the orchestra, although you could do everything with tracks now if you want to, and you could make it much simpler to do. But it's such a great story. And so, yeah, to get a chance, I didn't know the way when you find out what the show is, you go out and buy the Broadway cast album. And so I'm listening to Zero Mostel sing these wonderful songs. And that became the basis of my Tevye. It's like some version of Zero Mostel. And I saw during that same window, there was a high school nearby where we were doing it that was doing it. And the young actor playing Tevye had his experience of stepping into it was Topol in the movie. And that was the basis of his Tevye. And we did two different Tevyes. And of course, depending on which one you hear first, that's your favorite. And it's so amazing how Broadway and the larger media influences what we do as kids, but it's so powerful to get that influence and set you off in a direction where you are trying something and seeing if you can bring it to life. And I just had a ball. I absolutely fell in love with musical theater during that window of time.
So in your book, you mentioned, I'm coming to you from Michigan, so that's the context. So in your book, your first memory that you talk about from 2017 is in Frankenmuth, Michigan. Now, the question I have for you is not covered in the book, so we're diving deeper, but did you have the fried chicken when you were in Frankenmuth? Because it's known for its fried chicken.
I did not, but I had more great fudge in Frankenmuth than any place I've ever had fudge in my life. You could walk down the street and you can walk into 8 fudge shops within 200 yards. I just thought between that and the Christmas store in Frankenmuth, unbelievable Christmas store. And Christmas has been, which I talk about in the book, Christmas is a favorite holiday. It was a very special time in my youth growing up, and to have that, so to walk into Bronner's and experience their 365-day Christmas experience was pretty cool. And I've ordered online from Bronner's many times since then. Between that and the chocolate fudge, which I haven't ordered online because I'm just afraid I'm going to eat it all.
Just one of those things you got to get on the spot and then eat it. Maybe bring it home as a gift. That way, it's less calories that way if you just eat it.
It does call to you when it comes off the sheet and it's all firmed up and you got to have it now. It was great.
We have Mackinac Island too. So I don't know, but if Michigan and fudge, when you watch them make it, it shouldn't be underplayed. Anyone out there who is a lover of Christmas, your Christmas bucket list should include at one time in your life going to Bronner's Christmas Wonderland.
Absolutely. If you love Christmas, you will lose your mind in this place. It's pretty extraordinary. I recommend it highly. Go to Bronner's Frankenmuth and have some fudge.
All right,
although I didn't know about the fried chicken. I didn't know about that.
All right, when you're back and when you come back to Michigan one day, we'll go.
Yeah, fried chicken.
Yeah,
I love fried chicken, so that won't be a tough call.
It's one of those things where there's competing fried chicken places. So it's which one did you go to? Zenner's or yeah. So in your book, when you talk about dropping out of college and then moving, and then Valerie Landsberg is at the place where you're at. She was in Thank God It's Friday, which is a movie I had talked to Mark Lanau, and he was in that movie. And so the only reason I knew that movie, I was like, oh, this is only the other time I've ever seen this. It's famous for Donna Summer getting the Oscar for
Last Dance. Yeah.
It was just funny that things that pop up randomly. But
Valerie Landsberg was a cultural experience all by herself. I never met anyone like Valerie Landsberg before. When she walked in the door, this was just a different kind of woman than I had ever encountered before. From my sheltered Northern California upbringing and my college time, which was also relatively very sheltered, to meet this, brassy Beverly Hills chick was like, wow. It was like, this is a whole different thing. And she was great. She's a lot of fun.
So I love those types of stories, like the little kind of stories where you just go off and tell these little tidbits. It's amazing. So it's interesting, like your book, a lot of times you talk to people and they're like, I went out to Hollywood. I auditioned for 100 commercials. I got 100 commercials. I auditioned for 20 shows. I got 20 shows. Your story wasn't.
Wouldn't you love to audition for 100 commercials and get 100 commercials? No one does that. If you audition for 100, if you get 5, you're doing well.
I'm exaggerating. What I mean is it just seemed like everything, like they just flooded in with work. And it seemed, which is why I like your story, was there was a little more struggle there. And then, oh, hey, I love the part of that when you tell me you're at a frat house. Hey, we want you to come audition for Little House on the Prairie. And then, of course, life changed. Boom, pivot right there. Did you have any indication when you were auditioning for Michael Landon that you had gotten it? What was your feeling walking out of there before you had heard it?
I felt really good walking out the door. When I finished and I was saying goodbye to him, he said, what are you doing in the middle of May? That was his last question. And my last answer was, I'll be going through final exams, but that's what I'm doing in the middle of May. And he topped that with, I think we could wait another week. See ya. Now, so I had essentially been offered a part in the room before. And it was jarring to feel like you've been offered the part in the room and then 20 minutes later get back to your place, you get a call from your agent saying, sorry, sweetheart, it didn't work out. So I feel like I walked out of the room with the part, and by the time I got home, I'd lost the part. With Michael and with Little House, I didn't hear a word for 2.5 weeks. There was after he said what he said, and I left feeling like, oh my God, I've got this. But the nagging doubts that go into your head as each day passes with no word, all those demons of doubt and self-loathing and all the things that actors go through creep into your head. So when the offer finally came, I was just incredibly well, thrilled and very, very grateful and excited. Here I was like a week away from graduating from college, and I knew what I was going to be doing for the foreseeable future. I turned 23 on Saturday, May 20th, 1979, walking through graduation ceremonies at University of the Pacific. And 2 days later, I'm in Southern California in Simi Valley, starting my time on Little House. It was just this incredibly blessed time. There's no other way to put it. It just was an incredible window of time that literally changed everything for me. And look, I didn't become Tom Cruise, so that didn't happen. But at the same time, what I have come to realize and appreciate is that I'm part of something that is so beloved because of the visual connection in the series. I'm part of that, and I become a personification of what Laura writes about in her books as well for a certain viewer / reader. Maybe not in all cases, but like I'm going to be in there and they're thinking somewhere about who this guy is. That's a gift that television and film gives you that you just can't get anywhere else. And I'm eternally 23 to 28, not a bad period of time to be captured. And the fact that it has gone on and on the ensuing 45 years or 40 years after I was done making it, I never could have predicted that. I didn't predict that. I thought, okay, this is going to be over. Michael was absolutely certain it would go, that we would go on with this and it would have a life long after it was done being made. And he went farther to say, people will be watching this long after we're all gone. He specifically said that. And at the time, I just thought, wow, that can't be. What did I know? And I was 25. He was prescient about television. I think he understood something about the audience that I didn't understand at that point at all. And now, as we celebrate 50 years of Little House in 2024, I see no signs of the show going away. It's going to be very tough to replace it in people's minds. It certainly could happen if the right producer and director and the right actors get involved. Something amazing could happen, but the odds are against it. To strike lightning twice with something like this would be very hard to do. It is certainly possible. It absolutely could happen. And I hope for the rights holder of all the Little House books, for that family, I hope it does happen. For them, it's a great thing. But I'm very proud of what we did. And I think all of us who were a part of it are very proud of what we did. It's going to be tough to replace it.
And I hope they don't. There's nothing worse than remakes, especially when they don't work. And this has so much content behind it. It's not like it was a 90-minute movie and someone's, let's remake the 90-minute movie. This is a lot. And it's interesting.
It's well over 200 hours of content. So yeah, it's a lot to replace.
And Michael Landon couldn't have predicted this at the time, but technology helped probably have that vision come to life. Now that we have the advent when TV was on DVD, so people could buy their favorite shows, streaming now. I can go right now, just like I did the other day. I watched the Sweet 16 episode because I knew we were going to talk.
Yeah.
And it's just boom, like effortlessly I could do that. And for free. It wasn't like, and then it shows up on my TV. Hey, you should keep watching this. You know what I mean? So it's not going anywhere anytime soon. So it's very interesting.
It doesn't feel like it, Jeff. It really doesn't. It does feel like it's going to be here for the foreseeable future. Now that it became a digital property in 2014 for the 40th anniversary, now it's just a matter of recompressing it into whatever the most current codec is. And it's probably going to be ever increasingly efficient, smaller and smaller codecs that allow it to be stored in smaller and smaller space. And that bodes very well for the ongoing future of this, because you don't have to make it. it's right there with a push of a button. It becomes whatever codec it needs to become in order to work for the next big thing, whatever that is. So I think that all the digital content is in a very good place to continue on because of that, because of the accessibility.
Let's talk about the Sweet 16 episode, because I think it's unavoidable. Let's just talk about it. Known, very renowned for the last time Laura Ingalls wears braids on the series of Little House. This
Right.
is it's a pinnacle moment.
Yeah, no, it is. It was,
yeah. Oh yeah, and the kiss, and there was also a kiss, and so there was. I rewatched it because it's a big part and so much to talk about. It was interesting how in rewatching it, they definitely tried to make her older. Like there were lots of things that would have Michael Landon say, "Oh, she called her a woman," and she was specifically talking to you and saying, "Don't I look older?" All to probably mitigate the age gap between you guys. Sure. I will say in rewatching it, one of my favorite things as a father rewatching it was when you ask her to the dance and she doesn't immediately say yes, and Michael Landon just smirks. And then
he loved doing those shots where he could be over behind the actor who's being, and you see his reaction play. Yeah, he loved doing that. And he was wonderful in those moments. He was great in that stuff.
As a father, I felt it because I was just like, all right, that's my daughter handling this boy extremely well. I taught her well. And then it's a funny exchange with Karen right after that, where he goes, my daughter, and then she says, oh, and if she had just said yes, it would have been my daughter. And he goes, yep.
Right. Yeah, no, of course. He established that dynamic of Almanzo being too old for Laura right up front. And he established right up front that Caroline was more understanding of what her daughter was feeling, and cautioning her to go slow. Pause, just wanting it all to go away. And that created a nice push and pull dynamic between them. There's just a lot about worked. And it was, as you say, you're a dad. These are conversations that you would have with your daughter about this exact same topic. I mean, that is Little House in a nutshell, that those conversations can take place over those kinds of issues, which are so basic and just primary issues in people's lives. And Little House touched on so many of those kinds of things.
At the time, was there a literal, because she was 15, you were 23. At the time, was there, just in the public, now it would probably be different today because of just social media, but at the time, was there pushback on the series? Was it a controversy, or people just let it go?
Yeah, I don't think it was ever. I think the fact of the relationship was, in a sense, controversial, but we never felt a public blowback to this at all. I think because it was Little House and people had such underlying faith in the brand of what this was about, I think people gave it, if they had questions about it, they gave it the benefit of the doubt. And so there were a few letters to the editor in newspapers, but for the most part, pretty much accepting it as it came. Melissa and I have had this conversation now, and most recently for the book. You could never do that casting today. You could never put a 23-year-old man with a 15-year-old girl in today's world under any circumstances. And frankly, no one had done it before we did it. I think we really are in this very unique space, particularly for family-oriented television. I mean, it's possible that what was the HBO series, Sister Wives or whatever, where you had the polygamist families and all that, and then maybe you would have seen it there. But that was a commentary on that whole lifestyle, which wasn't always, there was judgment built into that. There was no judgment around Little House. Little House was a very idyllic thing. So the fact that audiences did, in the largest measure, just come along and accept it is a tribute to the things that they trusted and liked about the show, that this didn't create an overt problem for large numbers of audience members. Yes, I'm sure there was where a mother was not happy. Not bad at all.
The book lovers were probably like, he's not old enough. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You want to, yeah, it's by 2 years. Yeah. But then in the books, of course, when Lauren Almanzo really got married, she was actually 18 and he was 28. So at that point, you can't underestimate this or de-emphasize it. That difference between 15 to 18 for a young woman, that's a big dip. There's a lot that's going on in that 3-year period of time. I think Melissa was really pressed by this. And I think it's a tribute to her and her confidence as much as she wrote about the fact that it was just, she was flipped out by it. I say it all honesty, I never saw that in her. She gave no indication that she wasn't all in with this and completely okay. Was she thrilled about it? No, she wasn't. But I never sensed fear in her of this. I think perhaps a less secure or less seasoned young actress might have folded under the pressure of that if they really weren't prepared for it. The fact that Melissa was given no voice in this process and that her mother was given no voice and that her team had no voice in the process was a tribute to Michael Landon's power. There were no chemistry reads. I can't imagine this casting taking place today. I don't think it would happen, but it definitely wouldn't happen without a chemistry read. And there'd be all kinds of discussion about how appropriate this was. Michael made this decision and everybody went along. And there may have been doubts in all kinds of different places, but there weren't public doubts about it. Michael was so powerful as a producer at that point that if he said we were going to do this, that's what we did. And there were a few places where Sweet 16 was a big moment for the two characters, particularly for Laura. But for the most part, the episode where they get married, the Laura Ingalls Wilder two-parter, is really about the jilted love affair that older sister Eliza Jane is jilted by a character who was played wonderfully by Jamie Cromwell. The episode is really about that. The marriage isn't important. It's called Laura Ingalls Wilder, but Michael did not want people thinking too much about the wedding night. And so he de-emphasized that by making the story of heartbreak for Eliza Jane really where the power of the episode was. And I think it was like so many things Michael did. Brilliant decision.
Just the hug she gives you at the end after you get married. It's a great scene. You can feel that. It's cool.
She was great.
It's great to know though that like people could understand the context of it and accept it for the world of it is. So so many great stories. We want to leave some for the book. I did want to talk about, just because I'm Jeff, so you played a famous Jeff, Moondoggie, Griffin, and Gidget's summer reunion, and then new Gidget, which, by the way, in your book, you say it's not available, but I found it on YouTube. You can dive into it.
Can you watch it? Is it all on YouTube or just a few episodes?
Enough to know that the first episode tackles the controversy of windsurfing versus the direct assault on normal
the windsurfing
surfing.
lesson is what it's called. Exactly.
I think at least a lot of them are on there. I was watching. Yeah. But
nice.
So I had to dig in and see this. It's funny because talk to me about the Groundlings. You trained at the Groundlings?
Oh, yeah. The Groundlings was that at the time in Southern California was the premier improvisational acting company around. And I think if you think about that kind of work, you think of the Groundlings and Second City, maybe Second City first and then the Groundlings. But the people who have come out of both of these companies, it's a pretty, when you think of at the highest levels, the people that have become iconic in American comedy, so many of them came out of that background. There was something wonderful about learning the rules of improvisation. You're improvising, but there are rules to the improvisation. And the most important rule, as was taught by our wonderful teacher, Randy Bennett, was that you never deny. If someone throws out the premise that the sky is green, yeah, the sky is green, and you add information to that. And you never would say, no, the sky is yellow. You just wouldn't do it. You might say, and I love the yellow clouds. So that's adding information. So everything is a function of agreement. And comedy, wonderful comedy, can come out of that agreement as opposed to an argument. And that was the biggest thing that came out of that training. And it just got you loose. You went into this class from, I'm trying to think of what it was, like 10 to 2 or 10 to 1, 3 days a week in the Groundlings Theater on Melrose Boulevard in Southern California. And the laughter coming in that theater was just like a tonic. You just felt you came out of every class with a spring in your step, because you just would have such a great time laughing for hours with people that the more and more you worked with them, the more you trusted, the more you believed in what they were doing, you understood what they were going to be doing, and you could feed into that. You're developing your own characters and having fun with that. Yeah, the Groundlings cannot be diminished in any way as an important piece of anybody who's working in comedy. You want to spend some time with the Groundlings if you haven't done that, because it will take you places that you never were before, and that will really help you down the line.
I've done stand-up comedy, but I always tell people, either whichever one you want to do, stand-up or improv, they're like imperative to have some kind of background. It's like your whole world and how you engage with other people changes, and it's a great skill to have, just to be able to work with people like that. And with improv, you're right.
Yeah.
To always be adding instead of confronting. It's just a great lesson in general.
No, that is interesting. And I think I've watched a lot of the Beatles documentaries, and you watch the way, particularly the most recent one that Peter Jackson did. I don't know if you've watched that.
I loved it.
In a similar form to what we're talking about with improvisational comedy, I marveled as I watched this documentary and watched their creative process. No one ever said, no, I don't like that idea, or I don't like that lyric. They started spinning on a riff of an idea, and they would all add to it. And someone is taking copious notes and they are recording. But what a lesson in creativity that work is, to see these guys who are so reputedly or reportedly not getting along very well, but when they were in a creative space, for the most part, and then you hear these great songs come into existence that are part of our lives. It's just amazing to see how they were invented. And I love that. And it reminds me of that improvisational comedy process where you're adding to. And it's great stuff. And it is a lesson for creative people. Don't deny. Keep saying yes. It's hard to do that because you have to trust everything that's coming out of everybody. And it may not work. But if you keep saying yes, you have an opportunity to keep everyone flowing in a positive direction, and something good could happen.
The lesson I took from it is when you're watching like Paul McCartney he's building Get Back, I think. And some of those lyrics in the beginning were like, what? But they didn't say these are bad. They just worked themselves out of the song. Eventually it became what it needed to become. Nobody ever said, these are all bad, let's change the lyrics. It just became the new thing. And It's brilliant.
Yeah, so, it is. It's something we all need to pay attention to in the creative space.
So after being an absentee father on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, now you're focused a lot on directing and producing. And I know you've made like a few documentaries on Little House and various things. Is that this way? I could tell from a lot of your answers, just the stuff that you've absorbed through the years and the people you've worked with the way you answered certain questions. You love being behind the camera and creating the thing that people are going to now love forever.
Whether they're going to love it forever, you hope for, you don't know if that's going to happen. But I do love about that process is that you are there from the, at least if you are actively involved in something, you are there for the first blank screen and you start with an idea, and that idea can change and grow and alter, but it becomes something at the end. And particularly if you have an edict to do something and a responsibility to deliver something, there will be a show, a package, a something there at the end that has to be there. And I think that producers and directors are the closest ones to that process because they're ultimately the most responsible for the outcome. And I found that a very stimulating and enjoyable process to be a part of that, as opposed to the actor who is the last one hired in a production process, in a narrative film approach or any sort of film where there are actors involved. So much of the creative work is done before the actor gets there. And then a huge chunk of the creative work is done after the actor is captured on tape or digitally or film, if there's someone still shooting film. And then the movie comes into existence and becomes whatever it's going to become. I came to realize that I really love being there through all of those decisions that take you from pre-production to post-production to delivery. And I came to feel through that it was really the producers, the directors, and producers more than anybody are the ones who really have fun in the business because they're driving it. They're really shaping whatever this thing is going to become because they have to believe in it the longest. And they've got to stay with it the longest. That the on-camera talent can come and go. And they make their contribution, very important contribution. But how that contribution is shaped is going to be someone else's responsibility. It's not the actor's job to determine how that film or tape gets cut. I liked being in the room for that part of it, and that's been very satisfying to me. It's never going to be the kind of public buzz you get as an actor. It's not the same thing in that sense, but I think as an overall emotional, intellectual satisfaction, producing is a much more fulfilling, for me, a much more fulfilling process because I've had something to say about how it starts and how it comes out at the end that I'd never have as an actor.
Hey, you got to find where the creative path takes you and thrive. Dean, thank you so much for hanging out with me. This was amazing. I love your book. Let me pitch your book one more time. Prairie Man, My Little House Life and Beyond. Nailed it.
Good job, Jeff.
Hey, look at you reading the name of the book. Love the book. Really, I recommend everyone get it. There's so many stories we didn't cover. I'll tease one. There's a story about Madonna in this book that just killed me. I love it. It's worth it to get to that. That was a great story. I can't give all the goods away. Dean Butler, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I appreciate it.
Jeff, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your support of the book.